Hey guys, this is Andrew, and today we are going to talk about modes, specifically on guitar, but pretty much just general mode knowledge. So before I describe this, I do have another video that I'm actually on the guitar explaining guitar modes. This is basically just the paper version of that. So this is like the more rigorously defined, I guess, or like if you were to do like mathematics, what I showed you on the guitar is more of like the word explanation of an equation, where this would be the actual written on paper equation, if you will, just as a comparison. So if you remember from that video, if you watched it or if not, if you have the key of C major, inside of the key of C major, so I'll just get a little write down here, C major. So if you have the key of C major, inside of that key, there are 7 different modes that correspond to each of the notes. So what are the notes of C major? You have C, D, E, F, G, A, and B. Sorry if we got a little off screen there. So you have those notes, and each of these notes correspond to a mode, and they have a chord that goes along with that mode to accent the notes inside of that mode, basically. And so since this is the key, it's the first note, we have C Ionian. Now, what are the notes of C Ionian? C, D, E, F, G, A, B. It's the Ionian scale is the major scale. So there's really no difference for that one. It's just C, D, E, F, G, A, B. Now, the next mode that happens in the major key is Dorian, and in the key of C major, it is D, so D Dorian. And what are the notes in that mode? It is just you start at D, and you count all the way back. So it would be D, E, F, G, A, B, C. And that's the notes of D Dorian. In the key of C major. And then moving right along, in the key of C major, you have E Phrygian. Hope I don't make any spelling mistakes. Not sure if I wrote that right, but if not, I'll put a little thing here saying the correct spelling. I'm pretty sure I spelled that right. Anyways, it doesn't really matter. The important thing is that you understand each mode. But anyways, the mode E Phrygian starts E, F, G, A, B, C, and D. So you just start on E, work your way around, and moving right along to F, Lydian. Now, Lydian, you start at the F, count your way around, yeah. Going on to G, Mixolydian. Now I'm just trying to write these down fast, and then I'm going to go over the actual explanation of each mode and the chords that go along with each of these modes. So this one, you start along here, write it down. Just remember, just start in the G, work your way around, and again, this is just C major, but if this said G major instead of C major, you would have G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp instead of that. And then each of these would be changed to correspond with whatever one it is. So, for example, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. If you replaced it with the notes of G major instead of C major, any key you really want to, it's just going to correspond to each of these, right? So you could just replace these letters with whatever key that you happen to be in for whatever situation you're doing. So moving on, I guess I'll continue with this. A is Aeolian. And once again, I think I spelled that right, not 100% sure. Doesn't really matter. I believe these are all Greek names. Pretty sure. I'm not really sure. But anyways, moving on. Aeolian, you start on A. Now, Aeolian, well, actually, just Aeolian is the minor for that particular key. So if someone says in the key of A minor, you're really in the key of C major with the mode of A Aeolian. So just different names. So Ionian's major, Aeolian is minor. So in that same respect, in the key of C major, this is C Aeonian, and the respective minor to C major is A minor. So there's all these different ways to look at the same kind of thing, just so you know when people say play an A minor, you know that it's actually C major, and you know what notes you're dealing with, all the natural notes. So A minor and C major are really the same notes, it's just if you wanted to accent A Aeolian, you would play an A minor chord over it, or this for C Ionian, you would play a C major chord over it. And so now we go on to our last mode here. We have B Locrian, which is the worst sounding mode out of all of them, but it does have its uses. It sounds very evil and dark, and of course, music sometimes is evil and dark. I mean, we can't always have happy music, we can't always just have sad music. Sometimes we need something evil to get the point across, and Locrian is a very evil sounding, mysterious, exotic something. Same with Phrygian, it's kind of exotic Egyptian sounding, you know. Anyways, so now we'll get into our actual explanations of what each of these mean. So I have a nice little list here of each of the modes in the respective key of C major. Now, I've already told you that C Ionian is C major, so you can think of it as a very general happy sound, all the natural notes, and then the A Aeolian is the respective minor in that key. And so, to explain the other ones, I'll just kind of move down Dorian to Locrian. Dorian is a minor key, and it's not 100% minor. To accent the sound of Dorian, you do use a minor chord, but the other thing that you do is that the scale has a built-in minor tones and major tones. So let's say, just to compare it, you have Aeolian here, right? So now the way that modes work is that the intervals are what actually make the sounds over the chord. So if you were to play an A minor chord, it would accent the notes of Aeolian in the key of C major. Now, if you were to play a D minor chord over D Dorian, it's going to bring out the sound of Dorian, but it's a minor mode. And if you compare these two modes, based on the intervals between the notes, you will see that they're pretty similar, except for one note, I believe. So, starting the first note, we have D to E, which is a whole step, so it's two notes, right? Then we have A to B, down on Aeolian, so it's also a whole step. Then going from E to F and B to C, both of these go up a half step, right? So from B to C and from E to F, half step. And then to go from F to G, you go up a whole step. To go to C to D, you go up a whole step. And then from here on Dorian, you go up from G to A, whole step. From Aeolian, you go D to E, whole step. Now this is where it gets different. The minor key, the minor mode, Aeolian, is goes from E to F, which is a half step. So it's also a minor interval, whereas in Dorian, it goes from A to B, which is a whole step, and it ends up being a happier sounding interval. And then the last interval is also different because it goes a half step here and a whole step there. This is a minor interval, and this is a major interval. Sorry, other way around. This is a minor interval, this is a major interval. Basically, like, this is a major 7, and this is a minor 7. This would be a major 6, that would be minor 6. If you don't know exactly what the notes mean, don't worry about it. These kind of come over time. Just learning about the stuff, you eventually pick up on the little trinkets like that. But anyways, moving on. So the characteristics of the mode, specifically, if you play D minor over D Dorian, well, specifically if you play D minor over the key of C major, you will get the sound of Dorian. But the reason why it brings out that sound is because you play D minor. I don't know if you know anything about chord construction, but D minor, you would start on the mode, and chords generally go 1, 3, 5 for major, minor, and diminished. So depending on the mode will depend on if it's major, minor, or diminished, but it goes 1, 3, 5 to get the actual chord if it's just a basic 3-note chord. So to figure out the chord for each perspective mode, all you do is you start on the 1 of that mode, you get the 3, and then you get the 5, and that is the chord that will outline that mode. And I mean, it makes sense. The 3rd is the interval that gives the chord its sound. The 1 is the root note, and then the 5 is just kind of a 5th to beef it up. Or if it's a minor, like a minor 5th or a sharp 4, it'll be like an evil sound, a diminished sound, or like 2 flat thirds stacked on top of each other, like Locrian, which is why it sounds so evil. So, anyways, as I said, to outline C Ionian, you play C major. So if you look here, what is C major? You have C, E, and G in C major. And if you look here, 1, 3, 5, C, E, and G. Now, this isn't really a coincidence, but these are the outlining notes of the chord. So if you play the chord and you play C Ionian over it, if you accent C, E, and G, it'll bring out the chord tones and the mode tones a little better. And the same goes for all of these. So Dorian, D, F, and A, those are the mood notes of the mode. And I'm not sure if it's 100% true, but mode pretty much comes from mood in terms of what it is, because it is like a mood of the key. Each mode has a mood. It's kind of confusing to say it like that. Moving right along, Phrygian has kind of an exotic Egyptian sound to it, but it's not as evil as Locrian down here. And what is the chord for it? E, G, and B. So, what is that? E minor. So if you play E minor, which, as you can see, that's what it would be, the highlight notes will be E, G, and B. And to bring out the sounds of Phrygian, it has a half step up from the root note of the chord, and a half step up from the 5th. That's kind of what gives it its evil sound. So if you bounce, when you're playing E minor and you're playing in the key of C major, if you bounce around the E and the F and the B and the C, you'll bring out that Phrygian sound, the very exotic sound. And these two intervals are 5ths up from each other, which give it an even more exotic sound. Going on to Lydian, which is the more pretty sounding scale. I mean, I never liked it as much. I know that it's like Steve Vai's favorite mode, not scale. But anyways, F major is the respective chord that goes over that. Played over, the target notes are F, A, and C. And just to bring out some of the chord tones, like this note is under the 5th, so this one note will probably sound terrible, unless you use it correctly. But the rest are kind of whole steps around the notes, and you can kind of use those to your advantage, or you can take advantage of the half steps here and make it sound really off or evil or dark. But for most part, it's a pretty scale, and you have a, let's see, 1, 3, 5, you have a major 6th interval, and you have a minor 7th interval here. So just when you look at these modes, you kind of want to think, what are the notes that make this mode different? And going on to G here, what would be the one for G Mixolydian? 1, 3, 5. It's going to be G major. Now, the one of the characteristic notes of G Mixolydian is that it has a flat 7 interval, and that is actually the only way it differs from Ionian. Now, remember I told you earlier, if you had G major here instead of C major, you would have G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, and then it would go back to G, of course. Now, this is C major, and the only different note from C major to G major, if you know your circle of 5ths, this will help you memorize it. I can figure it out in my head. I know you don't need to really memorize it. You can just think on your instrument if you jump up a 5th, which you usually know what a 5th is if you know your instrument well. So the only different note is an F sharp instead of an F, but G Mixolydian does not have that because you're in the key of C major. So the only difference between Mixolydian and Ionian is that flat 7. So G major will work over this chord, but G7 specifically is like really what this mode needs to bring out its tones. So let's say you're just playing G major over it. Hitting that F note will really bring out the Mixolydian sound. So like sliding from F to G will give that 7th interval sound that'll really bring out the Mixolydian sound, which has this kind of cool jazzy feel to it. Now, Aeolian already went over it. It's minor. You have A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Straightforward. It has a minor 7th, a minor 3rd interval. 1, 3, 5 would be an A minor chord, A, C, and E, which I'm sure you know on your instrument what an A minor chord is. But to make it a 7th, you just add that 7th interval, and you have A minor 7. Whereas in the Mixolydian, you have G major 7. Or sorry, just G7. G regular 7, not G major 7. So yeah, that's basically minor. Big notes to the 3. Playing the B, like this whole middle area, sliding down to the A will give it a very, I don't know, minor sound to it. Or if you're playing metal, using like a drop A tuning, like sorry if that sounded weird, but like that, you know, I don't know. If you play metal music, you know what I'm talking about. If you have like drop A tuning, or if you do like a E minor tuning, so this would just be E aioli instead of A. Those first 3 notes are really like, they bring out the sound, and the 5th as well. And then that half step here sounds very dark. Anyways, just a bunch of little factoids to help you out when you're just trying to absorb all this information. You'll just absorb it over time. Don't try to memorize everything. It's better to understand it slowly than just try to just jumble it all up and memorize everything. It will not help you to memorize everything. It just takes time. So the last one, Locrian. This is the evil sounding one. Now, I know the chord is B diminished, but if you get B, D, and F, which is 1, 3, 5, what is the interval from B to D? Well, you have a half step and a whole step, so you have a minor third interval. What do you have from D to F? You have a whole step and then a half step. So it's another minor third. So 2 minor thirds stacked on top of each other. And that is basically a diminished chord. So you're playing an evil sounding chord over an evil sounding mode, gives you a very evil sound, or dark sound. And the reason why is because you have your root note, and then the next note up is a half step. So you can kind of bounce between these 2 notes, creates a lot of tension. And then also, for your 5 interval, you have a half step below, which is actually a flat 5, which is like an evil sounding note. So you have a 5, you know, it sounds nice, but a flat 5 is probably the worst interval you can have, or a sharp 4, whatever you want to call it. So you have 2 minor thirds stacked on top of each other. You have a half step above the root note and a half step below the 5th note. Creates a very, very dark tone. You have a minor 7th interval from the A to the B. Everything is dark about B Locrian, so its uses are dark. And you probably won't be able to make much happy music with Locrian. So anyways, that's basically this whole video. I just wanted to kind of show you all this stuff on paper, just so you have a decent understanding of what it looks like to write all this down. So as far as practice exercises go, I would recommend whatever kind of key that you want to memorize. Always start with C major, just because it's all natural notes, no sharps or flats. And try to learn keys in the circle of fifths. Now, if you don't know it, look up the circle of fifths. You don't have to memorize it, just reference it. So, like, you'll start with C major as whatever key you're trying to learn. Go next to G major. And why? Because that's a fifth up from G. So you're using the circle of fifths to find which next key to learn. And the reason why that you do that is because G major only has one sharp. And so it makes it much easier to memorize. So you have C major, no sharps or flats. You know all the notes. G major, only one sharp, and it's always going to be the note below that one. So G major has only one sharp, and it's F sharp. So that's a fifth up from that, going a fifth up from G. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. D major. Going on, when you start doing this, they add up. So you still have that F sharp from the G major, but now that you're in D major, you also have a C sharp. So every other note's the same except for F sharp and C sharp. Going up a fifth from this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you have A major. You still have the F sharp, you still have the C sharp, but now you also have a G sharp in there. And so now you have 3 sharps, and then you just keep working up. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, E major, now you add a D sharp, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you have B major, and now you add an A sharp. Keep going around, and then eventually you start getting the flats, and it gets much harder. But it's a good way to learn keys. It's a good way to memorize them correctly, to learn all the modes as you're going. It's very natural, and it just helps a lot. As far as other exercises, just kind of go through what I did. Write down the key, write down the notes, write down the respective modes. I didn't write down the chords, I just talked about them, but write down the chords. Maybe leave yourself some personal notes about each mode. which key that you like, what you need to work on, blah, blah, blah. And anyways, if you have any questions, as usual, leave me a comment below. Thank you very much for watching, and I will talk to you guys later. Bye.